Hello and welcome back to the Young Turks.
Hello.
And Vigeland's here.
Hi.
Hey, it's good to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
We decided to mix it up slightly. Jayar, rather than starting with us, will be joining in just a little bit. But in the end, it will be me and you and Jayar. It's been a fun week so far.
Yeah, and Jayar has to pop in and out because he's a very busy man.
Very busy person, but he will be joining us. We've got 2 hours. I'm gonna be leading the first. Emma's gonna be leading the second, as you've probably grown accustomed to throughout the week. And we've got some big stories that we're gonna be talking about in just a little bit. Perhaps the biggest story, the New York Times interviewed more than 10% of all the superdelegates, and it turns out they are indeed plotting in back rooms to potentially take this thing from Bernie Sanders if he has
conspiracy theorist, complete internet whack job.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy theory that they admitted to enthusiastically.
To the New York Times.
To the New York Times.
We can't deny it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Project Veritas, but it's something.
Something.
It's something. Okay, so we're gonna do that then, similar topic, but Elizabeth Warren was talking about it last night. And then Donald Trump wants to make inroads with black voters for the general election. And he's got a new sort of retail strategy, which we're gonna be delving into as well. With that though, why don't we launch into the news?
Let's do it.
Okay. Today, the New York Times released what I consider to be a bombshell, the results of their interviews with both a number of superdelegates as well as leaders in both the state and national Democratic Party, showing that the conversation that's been going on over the past month, the possibility that if Bernie Sanders enters the Democratic National Convention with a plurality but not a majority of delegates, they do indeed think that their job should be, and indeed they will, take the nomination away and give it to one of the people who got less support, less donations, less votes, less delegates, all of it.
Yeah, it's unsurprising. It's something we've thought was gonna happen for a really long time, or something that was hinted at, but the gall of them is still shocking at this point. They're the Democratic Party, but there's nothing democratic about them. And what this does is only further bolster Trump's claim that he's the one to drain the swamp, because what seems swampier than taking away the candidate who won the most votes and installing your own centrist who will inevitably lose to Trump, because that narrative only reinforces everything he ran on in 2016.
Exactly, and look, we've been talking about what this would mean if they attempt to do this. That is referenced in this New York Times article. I love the wording that they use for it. So they say dozens of interviews, Democratic establishment leaders this week show that they're not just worried about Mr. Sanders' candidacy, but are also willing to risk intra-party damage to stop his nomination at the convention in July if they get the chance. Risk intra-party damage, that's all it is. It'll be some damage if the person potentially, look, yes, could it be a 1% difference between him and number 2? It could be. It could also be that he has 49% of the vote. And if that's the case, there would be intra-party damage if they were to, like I've been saying all week, give the middle finger to literally millions of voters and say that whole thing that we just went through, all those primaries, all those caucuses, wasn't that fun? Didn't mean anything though. We're gonna take it and we're gonna give it to Klobuchar or Buttigieg or God only knows who. And we've got some names that popped up in this article that are gonna be a real trip.
Well, I would argue that perhaps, well, it's just insane that they're considering doing this, but you get into it and then I'll make my point.
Sure, so look, they talked to 93 party officials. All of them are superdelegates who could have a say on the nominee at the convention. They found overwhelming opposition to handing him the nomination that he will have the most delegates towards if he arrived with the most delegates but fell short of a majority, which is still, it's possible. It's, I don't know if it's a 30% chance, a 40% chance, but there is certainly a chance that that could happen. Only 9 of the 93 they interviewed said that Mr. Sanders should become the nominee purely on the basis of arriving at the convention with a plurality if he was short of a majority. Now understand, less than 10% of those that they talked to said that he should get it, even though literally every single time that the superdelegates have gotten involved, they have given their support to the person with the most delegates. Doesn't matter, plurality, majority, the person who had the most, they always supported. Now, suddenly, that is so extreme an idea to do that, to continue to do what you've always done, that they're going to finally flip on that, and only 10% think that that's how they should act.
Yeah, and their whole argument is that it's about who would defeat Donald Trump. It is so obvious that that's not your primary concern, because Bernie Sanders polls better in all of the states that you need to defeat Donald Trump than the other candidates that you're trying to prop up. It's so obvious that they are honestly willing to maybe destroy their own party, press self-destruct on their like robot bodies and just completely end the party rather than have Bernie Sanders be the nominee because he's that threatening to the very interests and institutions of the people that are in that party, right? So the consultant culture, the constant handouts, the contracts given to people, the fact that these people are employed, the reason they're so freaked out by this is because they've done a terrible job. They lost 1,000 seats under President Obama and have they lost to Trump, obviously. And so Bernie Sanders, they know when he comes, if he were to win and be the nominee, he'd clean house and it would represent a fundamental shift in everything they've come to know, in their employment status, in all of their friends. And so that's why it scares them so much. So let's not pretend this is about defeating Donald Trump. You are pretty much people who are overseeing this democratic process, who are trying to manipulate it so it helps you out and your employment out as opposed to the country. It's sick.
Yeah, look, we've got to get to these quotes, but I just want to say, you know what I haven't seen? I haven't seen like a DNC official on MSNBC or, even one of the centrists, like let's say Klobuchar or Buttigieg, they all say, we need someone who can beat Donald Trump. You know what they never do after that? Pull out the head-to-head polls with Donald Trump and show that they're the one to do it. Or if you're like a pundit and you're afraid, Sanders won't be able to do it, we need someone who can beat him. They never say, and here's all the evidence that he's not the guy. They never do that. Do you think it's because they fundamentally don't think that the evidence is valid, or is it just because it's inconvenient to what they're saying? I saw a poll today, head-to-head, Dem candidates, all of them, versus Trump in Pennsylvania. Seems like an important state, maybe we should win it. You know who has the best chance against Trump? You're not surprised, it's Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
You know how significant it is? He's literally the only one beating Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. All of the other Democrats are losing in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, one of the states that lost Hillary Clinton the election because it flipped, it was very close. And even Bernie Sanders is only up by a few points. The others are all down. So when they talk about electability, they don't give a damn about the chances. They care about their chances, to your point, of staying gainfully employed under a Democratic nominee that's gonna run, give them money, and then lose.
Yeah. Let's get to the people who are willing to speak on the record to the New York Times, because that's how cozy they feel in their powerful positions, that they'd be willing to put their names to this crap.
Exactly. Jay Jacobs, New York State Democratic Party chairman and a superdelegate, said that superdelegates should choose a nominee they believed had the best chance of defeating Mr. Trump if no candidate wins the majority of delegates during the primaries. He then whipped out a fat stack of polls. No, sorry, he didn't do that.
Oh,
he didn't. But he did bring it up. And let's see, Representative Jim Himes, also superdelegate, says, we're way past the day where party leaders can determine an outcome here. But I think there's a vibrant conversation about whether there's anything that can be done.
That's a heavy butt. That's a heavy butt.
That's a very heavy butt.
That's a thick butt.
Whether there's anything that can be done. That's how you talk about hurricanes, viruses. Is there anything that can be done? Come on, let's have a vibrant conversation. Let's have a vibrant conversation about what it means to live in a democracy. How about that? Can we have that, Representative Himes?
Oh, unless it's characterized as a republic.
Exactly, well, we're gonna get to that.
I'm teeing you up so well.
You are. We're like 2 off from that. But yes, Representative Steve Cohen of Tennessee said, if you could get to a nomination and pick Sherrod Brown, that would be wonderful.
Not running.
But he's not running. But that's more like a novel. Yeah, maybe a fictional novel in which he is running. Donald Trump's presidency is like a horror story. So if you can have a horror story, you might as well have a novel. Why don't we have a romance at this point, honestly? Sherrod Brown is not running. And do you know how many people have called out at the injustice that they don't get to vote for Sherrod Brown? I don't know if there are any.
Zero?
Well, him, presumably.
You know what this isn't? It's not a story of any kind, it's just real life. So perhaps we could behave within the confines of reality. I don't really know Steve Cohen, who I've met, by the way. Pretty nice guy, but
you talk about novels all the time?
I just the amount of people in the Democratic establishment who think this is an acceptable point of view, it's just shocking to me. I know it shouldn't be shocking at this point, but still, like, could you, 93.
93.
93.
It's a lot. Yeah, okay, so Representative Don Baer of Virginia says, at some point you could imagine saying, let's go get Mark Warner, Chris Coons, Nancy Pelosi, somebody that could win. and we could all get behind and celebrate.
Oh, Nancy Pelosi, she has like a bottom floor single-digit approval rating. I mean, it's not that low, but it's certainly one of the lowest of elected officials in the country.
I mean, I think she
dumb person.
You don't think she could pick off some moderate Republicans to vote for Nancy Pelosi?
All your friends like Pelosi. No one in the country likes Pelosi, and Bernie Sanders has one of the highest popularity, favorability ratings of any politician. Get out of Washington, go into the real world. It's maddening.
Yeah. I try not to, but I do read about what happens there at least. Okay, so there are other names being floated. Honestly, if it's a novel, let's just put up like Gollum or something. Like that would make a good story. Okay, William Owen, Tennessee DNC member says, Michelle Obama's the only person I can think of who can unify the party and help us win.
Oh my God.
This election is about saving the American experiment as a republic. It's also about saving the world. This is not an ordinary election. Notice he said saving the American experiment as a republic, not saving it as a democracy.
Certainly.
He's a Democrat. He's more interested in the republic part at that point.
Save the republic, save the world.
Exactly.
Install Michelle Obama, who is never
running?
been a politician in her life.
I like her.
She's
like her
great.
Too.
She's great.
I
love working out.
Exactly.
I mean, not that much. I don't know, I'm losing my mind.
That is a possibility. Now, let's just add a little bit of context to that last one. We haven't been delving too much into any of these individuals, but William Owen is Tennessee DNC member. Also, according to, I believe it was Lee Fang at The Intercept, runs a lobbying firm called Asset and Equity Corporations, who has donated to Senators Mike Rounds, Dan Sullivan. Those are both Republicans, by the way, and gave $8,500 to a joint fundraising committee designed to benefit Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
I'm so
But thank God he's giving us his opinion on who should be the Democratic nominee.
It's not just an opinion, it's something that could affect things. 93 who spoke to the New York Times. Can you imagine how many more who didn't speak to the New York Times?
By the way, and so we're gonna talk a little bit more later on about superdelegates and how they used to vote, how they're voting now, a little bit of context for that because they're talking to superdelegates. He worked in 2018 to block a Sanders-backed plan to weaken the role of superdelegates in the nomination process. He said at the time, according to Politico, if we don't have a vote, then what good are we? Well, you got money, you can give it to Mitch McConnell, you still got that. That's what you got. So let's add a little bit more, don't break your pen.
Sorry.
Representative Veronica Escobar, Democrat of Texas, added that she would not support Sanders even if he enters the convention with 40% of the pledged delegates, saying, if 60% is not with Bernie Sanders, I think that says something, I really do. I mean, one thing it might say is that we still have like 9 or 10 people running for the presidency, even though the vast majority of them know they don't have, a chance in hell of actually winning. It could mean that maybe.
I hope Klobuchar stays in until November. So, I mean, seriously, stay in, everybody. Make sure that you're splitting up that moderate vote so that the undemocratic hacks at the Democratic National Committee are unable to actually pull this off. Because this is scary. This is not a joke, no longer a drill. The Bernie Sanders, the ability for the Democratic National Committee to actually sabotage Bernie Sanders in a way that would be I would say it wouldn't be unprecedented, but they kind of did it in 2016. But this would be a whole nother level.
Yeah.
I'd say there are two scenarios and they could both happen, right? They strip Bernie Sanders of the nomination if he gets the plurality of delegates, if he gets the most amount of all of the other candidates, and they give it to someone else, or if they give it to Bloomberg. And both of those scenarios mean the end of the Democratic Party, I think, as we know it. I don't know.
Imagine. Well, first of all, we'll talk about Sanders supporters. Imagine like all you've done. Imagine donating to a candidate, having it taken away. Imagine you went and you canvassed, you knocked on doors, you made phone calls, you talked to your family and friends about him, and then they take it away. Imagine if you're one of his, by the end of this process, literally millions and millions of voters who are enthusiastic in support of him, to have it taken away. And honestly, look, that's the most obvious example that the most supported candidate in this hypothetical and his supporters will be robbed of this. But if you're a supporter, let's say Elizabeth Warren. Let's say you support Elizabeth Warren. You donated to her, you canvassed for her, all of that. And in the end, they give it to Bloomberg. So look, they didn't specifically rob Elizabeth Warren, but they did imply that all of that was just fun and games, all that stuff about democracy and the primaries and the caucuses. And remember how we got so worked up about it, and in the end, it meant absolutely nothing. how much faith would you have in that party? If you were literally the supporter of anyone other than the loser they pluck from obscurity to hand the nominee to, why would you ever trust this party again?
So I thought the Democratic Party was really concerned about chaos.
Chaos, they say that.
Yeah, they really want it to be a smooth process because, Vladimir Putin is creeping behind the scenes and he's opening up Nate Silver every morning to check, which candidate should I back today? But it's of course Bernie Sanders. He decides that every day because Bernie's terrible and that's what the general consensus is from the establishment. Do you think Putin would be gleeful if the Democratic National Committee took the nomination away from Bernie Sanders if he won the most votes? Do you think that might sow the chaos that they say they care about in preserving the American way?
I know that this is a hyperbolic thing and everybody says it. I can't think of anything that would make him happier, honestly, at this point, than if they
Not that
stole
they really
the nomination.
Care, but that's what Democrats say they care about.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if Putin wants chaos, which Buttigieg tells me every day, multiple times, if that's what he wants, what is more chaotic than a contested convention where the most popular candidate has the nomination stolen from them? By its very nature, whether you support that plan or not, you have to acknowledge that that is insane chaos, historic chaos.
Bernie Sanders, next debate, please just use that point because as soon as you say Putin, everyone's gonna drop to, then it may be wrong.
Yeah, and really though, like Buttigieg, he's not the only one, but he's the most obvious. He stands on the debate stage and says the chaos this, and then he says that he does not believe that the person with the most delegates should actually win. Like if we had, I'm not saying a progressive debate moderator, but if we just had a rational person who was not like actively trying to stop Bernie Sanders from getting it, how is that not a question that they're all facing at all the debates? How can you support a plan that is obviously going to lead to intense chaos in your party and likely destabilize the party and hand over the win to Donald Trump, at least as a possibility? They gave plenty of hypotheticals about Chinese cyber attacks and things like that. This is designed to create that chaos, and yet that doesn't generate any sort of controversy on the debate stage.
Bernie's got to stand up for himself better.
He does. Look, let's go to a little bit of video because we read you some great quotes and that's all well and good, but I think it's even more stunning, this approach that they're taking when you see it coming from one of their representatives' mouths. I wanna show you a video of I believe he's former state senator, this is Anton Gunn, talking about the possibility that a contested convention where Bernie Sanders has the most delegates could end up giving the nomination to someone else.
This is what people need to remember. The Democratic Party has a party. The party decides its nominee. The public doesn't really decide the nominee. The public gets to vote for President of the United States, but people who are active in the party, who participate in the party, they decide the nominee.
So look, I get he's being supportive of all the people in the party like him that want this to fundamentally not be a democratic process, but he has to acknowledge that what he just said is, we have these primaries and caucuses, but at the end of the day, they don't decide, the voters, in all of these. In the past, we've gotten the person that we want, and so we allow this facade of democracy to go on, but at the end of the day, we, the party, we get to decide, not those voters.
Do you guys know the Republicans don't have superdelegates? They don't have a process that's anywhere close to this. How are we allowing them to win the democracy narrative?
I mean, they've certainly got their own problems in their primary process, but in this regard, the Republican Party didn't set up.
It's the perception. I mean, look, like we're losing the perception that we have the moral high ground and the Democratic high ground because it's the reality. They didn't stop Trump. They let him through. They let him be the nominee. That's who the base wanted. The base wants Bernie Sanders. Let him be the nominee. Or you're not the Democratic Party, big D, small D. You're just a Republic Party. I mean, like honestly, we could make those puns.
It should be the Republicans and the Republic.
Right. I mean, it's disgusting, to say the least.
Let's see, maybe this is disgusting too. Let's go to a little bit more of the video talking about what Bernie Sanders needs to understand about this process.
Superdelegates are very influential in the party. Also, delegates are very influential. And just because you're a pledged delegate for Bernie Sanders or a pledged delegate for Joe Biden doesn't mean when you get to the convention floor that you'll stay a delegate for Biden or Sanders. That's a process. Bernie got to understand that process, and it's a real selective and detailed process. In 2008, The Obama campaign from the very beginning focused on the delegate process because we knew it all was going to come down to the delegates, who's committed to you, who wants to be on your team at the end, and do you really feel like they can be elected?
Okay, he is referencing the 2008 convention. Hillary Clinton was making the case, that she's the better candidate, and she was trying to say that, they should overturn the will of the people to put me instead of President Obama now. That we said at the time that was outrageous and ridiculous. We're saying it now, and the party actually obliged because President Obama didn't threaten them in the way that Bernie Sanders does now. But it's disgusting that you would use that as an example when Bernie would be in the position that Obama was in 2008, even though it's not the same because Obama got a majority. So, but it's more alike than the topsy-turvy analogy he's making there.
Yeah, and it's a good thing that the superdelegates didn't listen to Hillary Clinton and flip the results. Obama won all of the presidential elections he ran in. Hillary Clinton didn't. So it looks like they went with the one that the people wanted. That was the safer choice in 2008. And look, did Barack Obama have a strategy where he was proactively going to the superdelegates to try to convince them? I'll trust him when he says that that's the case. Is that pragmatic? Is that wise? Sure. Is that the way that things should be? No, it shouldn't be consideration at all. They're going out there to convince the voters to support them, to donate their time and their money, their energy, their passion to their candidacy. They shouldn't then also have to go and have expensive dinners with superdelegates who are super influential to convince them that if it comes down to it, hey, could you not flip on me and also at the same time flip off the voters and give it to someone else? And I will wine and dine you however is necessary to make sure that you don't do that. What part of a democracy is that? And obviously, most people don't even understand this. They don't know about this because it is ridiculous. It shouldn't exist in the first place. We're gonna get into it in the next thing about the previous effort to get rid of superdelegates, but this should launch us into a second round of this. No matter what happens, if Bernie wins, if Bernie loses, the superdelegates should go. And I'm saying not a contested convention. I'm saying if hypothetically he actually lost the election.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we do have to take our first break though, but when we come back, we've got a little bit more on this with Elizabeth Warren tossing some bombs at last night's town hall.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
Hello, and welcome back. And the Vigeland's here, and myself.
From yelling.
I'm not gonna make it through this year. I don't think. I don't think. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of your members' comments. Oh, did you not know that if you're a member, you can send a members' comments and we'll read them? But again, you have to be a member, so head to tyt.com/John. Or join, but John is also good.
tyt.com/Emma, but whatever.
That's not a thing. It's gonna virus. So anyway, not a cheetah, I'm not lying, says, hello all. The Hill just reported that Bernie got Al Sharpton's endorsement. That's big ahead of South Carolina. What do you know? I saw Al Sharpton saying some nice things about Bernie over the last week.
That's great. Thanks for the breaking news.
Thank you. Not a cheetah. I'm not lying. So I don't know what species you are. Presumably a mammal. Thank you for that breaking news. Okay, let's see. Toss a coin to your progressive candidate. That's a good reference. The thing is, they literally would rather have Trump than Bernie. Anything but ending the corporate donations. See, I understand that this is like the least popular position I have. I do think that they have convinced themselves that the right centrists will still win. I think they're 100% wrong, but I don't think they literally think. No,
they don't. They don't. But I think that's more of a commentary on it being a subconscious.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not actually what they think. I just don't think it's consciously what they think.
Right, I agree with you.
Yeah, you always should. Super chats also came in with Perthyron saying, TYT, be honest now, you've locked up Cenk and Anna in order to make a revolution. They're in the basement, actually.
I don't know if those two would be anti-revolution.
Yeah, I don't understand why they wouldn't want to be a part of it necessarily.
Cenk, I feel like, would be like at the front lines.
Yeah, okay, so let's see. Fire Faye 83 says it's because the political elites, the pundit class, and the clowns at the head of the DNC actually hate and fear Bernie more than they do Trump. I like that way of putting it better, actually.
Okay.
That their emotional objection to Bernie Sanders is more salient to them than to Trump.
That's a good point.
I will say, I think we got more TYT Live, super chats, and member comments about that story than almost anything else in literally months. So
that's awesome.
Obviously, it's something you care about, and you should. It's important, and we've got more actually. So with that, why don't we jump into it? Warren is one of the, basically all of the candidates running for president other than Bernie Sanders who support a convention potentially giving the nomination to someone who did not earn it by getting the most votes and the most delegates. And so she was questioned about that at a town hall last night by a supporter of Bernie Sanders, and here's what she had to say.
Can you explain why the will of the voters should not matter if no candidate reaches a majority of delegates?
So you do know that was Bernie's position in 2016?
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah.
He won 22 states, so he went to the convention.
That was
for his
Bernie's
voters.
position in 2016, that it should not go to the person who had a plurality.
Okay.
So, and remember, his last play was to superdelegates. So the way I see this is you write the rules before you know where everybody stands, and then you stick with those rules. So for me, Bernie had a big hand in writing these rules. I didn't write them. But Bernie did when they were putting together the 2016 platform for the Democratic Convention. Those are the rules that he wanted to write and others wanted to write. Everybody got in the race thinking that was the set of rules. I don't see how come you get to change it just because he now thinks there's an advantage to him for doing that.
Okay, so there are two possibilities coming out of that. Either Senator Warren is very mistaken about what actually happened between 2016 and today, or the other option. She wants you to be mistaken, so she's lying to you.
She's doing what I think the most effective obfuscations do is it has kernels of truth, but it is certainly not the reality.
Exactly, and look, through the course of this video, we're gonna walk through a couple of, let's as shorthand, we'll call them lies. A couple of the lies in that video that you just saw. So first, I want to show you a little bit of a sort of a mashup that Walker Bragman put together. It's a little bit of video from 2016 of what Bernie Sanders was actually saying at the time.
So you do know that was Bernie's position in 2016, that it should not go to the person who had a plurality. His last play was to superdelegates.
A superdelegate is thinking about going to you, but Hillary Clinton won their state. Presumably they should stick with Hillary Clinton.
Look, there's not a rigid rule, but I think, if you win, Hillary Clinton wins with 53% of the vote. She won Illinois by a point or two, sure. But when a candidate, whether it's Clinton or myself, she demolished us in Mississippi, I think the superdelegates should support her in Mississippi. But when in states like Colorado, and in many other states, Utah, etc., we win the overwhelming majority of vote, I think those superdelegates should go with their state.
You made a distinction between superdelegates from states you won.
So what you saw there was, look, he was existing inside of the context of superdelegates being there, and there's more context we're gonna add, but what he was saying was, if someone had an overwhelming lead in a state, they should get the superdelegate support. He said specifically there, including if it's Hillary Clinton. So what he said is the superdelegates should respect the will of the voters of that state. And that has been twisted by Elizabeth Warren at the town hall, by people in the news in any number of articles into, he didn't like it before, but now he likes it, to make him seem like a hypocrite when his stance that the voters should decide was exactly the same in 2016 and 2020.
Yeah, so look, she's making her case. She's not gonna win. And I think it's a huge mistake because she's being untruthful on her way to eventually losing. She'll probably not win one state, including her home state of Massachusetts. And she, for a while, was the front runner for Bernie Sanders' vice presidential pick. Now, a lot of things can change. A lot of bad things are said in primary contests. Remember the very testy Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton primary contest in 2008, and then he made her his Secretary of State. So a lot of things can change leading up to the general election. But what are you doing? Why are you being the candidate that's against democracy? And also, you're misleading people to get there. The one kernel of truth is that there were hints from Bernie's team back in 2016 when they said, Bernie's the best candidate against Trump. We can't afford to put forward a nominee who's polling so poorly against Donald Trump because he's a unique threat to our country. They've been proven right because she lost to Donald Trump, but they never went so far to say overturn the will of the people and make it so that that Bernie Sanders is the nominee. They were trying to make the best case that they can, as Elizabeth Warren is attempting to do, but she's doing it through lying. And it's just, you can tell she gets her back up, like she gets aggressive when she's talking to that Bernie Sanders supporter, because there's just something in her that it just doesn't sit right. And she's like, why are these Bernie Sanders supporters holding me to account? Because I was trying really hard to straddle this line between progressive and welcoming in the establishment wing of the party, and she's not able to do it because there's too much of a schism there. And they don't like you either, Elizabeth Warren. You're selling out your progressive credentials for nothing. You're not gonna win, right? And again, as a senator, legislatively, like talking about primarying her is like truly one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. If Bernie Sanders is president, she will vote everything through and get people to vote for him. She has so much power and is one, again, legislatively, top 5. It's really hard to get a true progressive in the Senate. It's not the House, that's easier. But again, I'm just saying that she's losing a lot of goodwill.
Yeah, in terms of the vice president thing, I don't know, but I do know that if you subscribe to youtube.com/The Damage Report, Emma and I have a video coming out this weekend, our top 10 suggestions for who we should pick.
Shameless plug.
I will say there's at least one pick from me that's sure to anger you, so look forward to that.
There's probably one pick from me. Might be my number 1.
Yeah, but
that will anger people.
Maybe. But watch the video before getting angry. Maybe we explain our reasoning.
John is bummed he's getting ratioed.
Yeah, it's happened before. It'll happen again. Look, we talked about what Bernie was actually saying, and by the way, to people who will say Bernie, so X person had Y position then, and now they have Z position now. Ha ha ha! You've changed. Why don't you have a standard? Like those people say that he's flipped, but they don't acknowledge that they're flipping in the opposite direction. So Elizabeth Warren is saying that he wanted it to be switched before, and now he doesn't. Look at that, that's opportunistic. Okay, but so what do you stand for? What do you think should happen? Because the thing is, Warren is actually available on video saying back then that the will of the voters shouldn't be overthrown by the superdelegates. So it looks like if Bernie was shifting, we'd already shown you that he hasn't, then he's not the only one because she's shifting too. Like, why can't people just have a standard? I have a standard. The person with the most votes should win. That's a good reason to get rid of superdelegates, the Electoral College, a whole bunch of things that are fundamentally undemocratic. Now, in addition to the misinformation she was spreading about what Bernie was actually saying in 2016, I've also seen a lot of dissection of the process whereby we got these rules, and she spread some misinformation there as well. So here is a bit, this is from Jonathan Allen in NBC News. Ultimately, the rules changes before this election were a compromise, not exactly what Sanders wanted, but he's the only 2020 Democratic candidate who had a real hand in the process. His top advisors, including 2016 campaign manager Jeff Weaver, 2020 campaign co-chair Nina Turner, and former Communications Workers of America President Larry Cohen were members of the commission. So what she keeps saying, and many people keep saying, is that at the 2016 platform committee, they changed the rules on superdelegates and Bernie got what he wanted, but now he's got sour grapes and he doesn't want it anymore. That's wrong in multiple ways. First of all, the rules weren't changed at the platform committee meeting and they weren't changed in 2016. They were changed more than a year later at the Unity and Reform Commission meeting, which we've both been at. That's when it was changed. By the way, both of those committees were I don't know if overwhelmingly is the right word, but the majority were Hillary Clinton picked people. So again, in the end, Bernie wasn't the one who was dictating the process. And most importantly, they didn't want superdelegates to exist at all. They tried to eliminate them, they were overruled. We ended up with a compromise to stop them from overthrowing the will of the voters, at least on the first vote. But if the Bernie supporters had gotten their way, they wouldn't exist now and we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in. So if you're going to dredge up history, at least get one element of it right.
And the chair of the committee was a Hillary Clinton person. The vice chair was a Bernie Sanders person. I think that kind of says enough. He did not have a majority of people on that Unity Reform Commission. Again, we were there and there The elimination of superdelegates was one of the #1 priorities of the Bernie Sanders people there, and they did not get what they wanted. So when you're trying to say Bernie was pro superdelegates in the process with 2016, that's rewriting history and rewriting it to your advantage. It blows my mind that she's going down, swinging like this, swinging wildly, swinging aggressively, and seemingly just burning up things Daenerys style in her wake.
Let's not go there. We're already angry enough. Okay.
Yeah, but it's whatever. You know how I feel about it. It's just a terrible, terrible mistake, and she's doing it purposefully, and you can tell when she's interacting with that Bernie Sanders voter that it's just something that angers her inside of her because she knows she does not have the moral high ground.
Yeah, and I just, again, how is this not coming up the debates? That Warren and all the rest are like, oh yeah, will of the voters, who cares about that? Let's overturn it. Every one of those same candidates, furious that after a popular vote that went to Hillary by millions of votes, the Electoral College overturned it. Remember how angry you were? How fundamentally undemocratic that was? The righteous fury you had? Let's do that in the Democratic Party now. That's a good idea. That really buttresses your moral position going into another election where, hypothetically, the Republicans could win while getting less votes. Okay, with that, we're gonna take a short break. You know why? So we have a surprise after this. That surprise is named Jayar Jackson. We'll see you in a few.
You just spoiled the surprise. Okay, bye.